The rain had been falling since morning. It wasn't heavy, just soft and endless, like the sky was tired but couldn't stop crying. On the edge of the old highway stood a small diner called Sonny's Place. It was quiet most of the time, only filled with the sound of clinking dishes and soft country music from a dusty old radio. Emily worked there almost every day. She was only 22, cheerful, polite, and always ready to help anyone who walked through the door. She lived alone in a tiny apartment behind the diner. Her life was simple, but she liked it that way. She loved watching the travelers come and go, truck drivers, tired families, and sometimes lonely old men who just wanted to talk. That afternoon, everything felt calm and ordinary. Emily wiped the tables one by one while her co-worker, Mr. Jenkins, the cook, hummed to a song in the kitchen. The rain tapped against the window like a gentle rhythm. Then, through the gray glass, Emily saw the blur of a motorcycle light. A man on a big black bike pulled into the parking lot. The engine was loud, breaking the silence. He wore a dark leather jacket, heavy gloves, and a helmet with a scratched visor. When he turned the engine off, the whole place seemed to hold its breath. Emily's eyes followed him as he stepped inside. The bell above the door gave a soft ring. He removed his helmet, revealing a face marked with age, scars, and stories. His hair was short and gray at the sides. On the back of his jacket was a large red and white patch, the symbol of the Hells Angels. The few customers inside turned quiet. Two old men at the counter exchanged nervous looks. A mother pulled her little boy closer. Even Mr. Jenkins peeked out from the kitchen with wide eyes. Emily, however, just smiled gently and walked up to him. "Good afternoon, sir. You can sit wherever you like," she said kindly. The man nodded, his voice rough but polite. "Coffee, black." Emily nodded and brought him a cup. She noticed his hands, strong but trembling slightly, maybe from the cold. His jacket was wet from the rain. He sat alone, quietly drinking, his eyes tired but peaceful. In the corner, two truck drivers whispered, "That's a Hells Angel, right? You don't see them around here much." "Yeah," the other replied softly. "They're trouble. You better keep your distance." Emily heard them but didn't let it change her face. She had served all kinds of people before. She believed everyone deserved kindness, no matter how they looked. As she refilled his cup, the biker looked up at her. "Thank you," he said, his voice low but sincere. "You're welcome," she replied with a small smile. Outside, thunder rolled far away. The sound of the rain grew heavier. Emily noticed the man had a small patch on his sleeve, in memory of brothers lost. She didn't know what it meant, but something about it felt sad. For a while, the diner was quiet again. The man ate his food slowly, never bothering anyone. Emily went about her work, but she could feel the tension in the room. People kept watching him from the corners of their eyes. Then, the silence broke. The door opened again. Two police officers walked in, rain dripping from their jackets. Their eyes landed instantly on the biker. One of them muttered something to the other and smirked. "Afternoon," one officer said loudly. "Mind showing us your ID, buddy?" The biker looked up calmly. "Just having lunch," he said softly. "Yeah, sure you are," the officer said, stepping closer. "You people always are." Emily froze behind the counter. The air felt heavy. The customers went completely silent. The second officer crossed his arms. "We got reports of a biker speeding on Route 17, big black Harley, red patch. That sound familiar?" The man sighed. "Wasn't me. Haven't been near that road today?" The first officer gave a fake laugh. "You think we're stupid? Guys like you always say that." He leaned over the table, staring into the biker's face. "You part of that gang, huh?" The biker didn't answer. His hand stayed still on the table. Emily's heart pounded. She could see it. He wasn't being rude or dangerous. He was just tired, trying not to start trouble. Mr. Jenkins whispered from the kitchen door, "Emily, stay out of it." But she couldn't. Something inside her told her this wasn't right. The man had done nothing wrong. He had paid for his food, sat quietly, and respected everyone. Yet they were treating him like a criminal just because of his jacket. Emily took a deep breath. Her hands trembled slightly as she wiped them on her apron. Then, with all the courage she had, she stepped forward. "Excuse me, officers," she said, her voice steady but soft. "He hasn't done anything wrong. He's just having his meal. Please don't disturb him." Everyone turned to look at her. The officers blinked, surprised that a young girl would speak up. One of them frowned. "You defending him?" Emily nodded. "I'm defending what's right." The biker looked at her, his eyes full of quiet respect. For a moment, nobody said a word. Only the rain could be heard hitting the windows. The tension in that little diner could be cut with a knife. Emily didn't know it then, but that small moment of courage would spread far beyond those four walls. It would echo down highways, across towns, and into the hearts of hundreds of people she had never met. Because sometimes, one act of kindness starts a storm of its own. The diner was so quiet that you could hear the rain hitting the windows. Every pair of eyes in the room turned toward Emily. The two police officers stood still for a moment, surprised that a young waitress had dared to interrupt them. Emily's voice had been soft, but it carried strength. She didn't shout. She didn't argue. She just spoke with calm courage. "He's done nothing wrong," she said again. "He's a paying customer. Please let him finish his meal in peace." The taller officer looked annoyed. He turned to his partner. "You hear that? She's protecting a biker now," the other one chuckled. "Maybe she likes bad boys." A few customers laughed nervously, but Emily didn't back down. Her heart was racing fast, but her eyes stayed firm. "Sir, please," she said. "You're scaring my customers." "You're scaring me. He didn't do anything." The biker still sat quietly, his fork untouched. His eyes met Emily's for a second, a silent message of gratitude and warning at the same time. He didn't want her to get in trouble because of him. The tall officer smirked. "You sure about that?" "You know who he is? People like him—" Emily cut him off, politely but firmly. "I don't care who he is. I only see how he's behaving here. And he's done nothing wrong." The shorter officer took a step closer to her. "You should watch your tone, young lady." Her throat felt tight, but she didn't look away. The other customers just watched quietly, afraid to get involved. Even Mr. Jenkins peeked from the kitchen but didn't move an inch. Finally, the biker spoke. His voice was deep, calm, and tired. "She's right, officers. I'm not looking for trouble. I'm just passing through. I'll pay and go." He reached into his jacket for his wallet, but the taller officer's hand moved toward his belt. "Hey, keep your hands where I can see them." He barked. Emily gasped. "He's just paying," she said quickly, her voice rising a little. The biker froze and slowly raised both hands. "Relax," he said quietly. "Just paying my bill." He placed the wallet on the table carefully, sliding it forward. The taller officer's face softened a little, realizing he had overreacted. The tension in the air was thick enough to choke on. Finally, the officer stepped back, muttering under his breath. "Fine, pay and leave. But don't hang around this town again." Emily clenched her fists. "That's not fair," she said softly. "You can't treat people that way." The taller officer turned his head sharply. "You want to join him, miss? Maybe we should check your ID, too." The diner went dead silent. For a second, Emily's courage wavered. Her hands trembled slightly, but she didn't move. She took a slow breath. "I'm just doing my job," she said calmly. "This diner serves everyone who walks in, police, travelers, bikers, anyone. That's how my boss taught me. Fairness and kindness." Her words hung in the air. They weren't angry. They were just true. The taller officer stared at her for a few seconds, then sighed and looked away. "Whatever," he said. "Come on, let's go." The two officers turned and walked out. The bell above the door rang again, and the sound of their car pulling away was like a release of pressure. Everyone in the diner let out a breath they didn't realize they were holding. Emily turned back toward the biker. He was still sitting there, quiet. Then slowly he smiled. It was small, but real. "Thank you," he said simply. Emily smiled back. "You're welcome." He placed a few bills on the table, enough to pay double his bill. "For the trouble," he said. "You don't have to," she replied. "I know," he said. "That's why I want to." He stood up, put on his jacket, and nodded once before leaving. The bell rang again as the door closed behind him. For a while, nobody spoke. The rain had stopped. Only the dripping sound from the roof filled the silence. Finally, Mr. Jenkins came out from the kitchen, shaking his head. "Emily, that was brave. But you shouldn't have done that. You could have lost your job or worse." Emily wiped her hands with a towel and gave a small smile. I just did what I thought was right. He wasn't hurting anyone. One of the old men at the counter said quietly, "Not everyone would have done what you did." Another customer added, "You've got guts, girl." Emily laughed nervously, maybe just a little too much. As the hours passed, the story began to spread. Truckers told other diners along the highway. A man posted about it on social media. "Waitress defends biker from rude cops," the post said. By nightfall, hundreds of people had shared it. Emily didn't know any of that yet. She just sat by the window after closing, sipping coffee and watching the dark road outside. The neon diner sign flickered gently in the rain-soaked reflection on the asphalt. She thought about the man, his tired eyes, the scars on his hands, and the patch on his jacket that said, "In memory of brothers lost." Something told her she hadn't seen the last of him. When she went to bed that night, she didn't know that her small act of courage would travel faster than the wind. And somewhere, miles away, hundreds of engines would soon roar to life because of her. The next morning, sunlight touched the small diner like a soft, golden blanket. Birds chirped outside, and the smell of fresh coffee filled the air. It looked like any normal day. But for Emily, something inside her had changed. She couldn't stop thinking about what happened yesterday, the way the police had treated that man, the way the diner had gone silent, and how her heart had been pounding when she spoke up. She had never done anything like that before. As she wiped the counter, Mr. Jenkins looked at her with a half smile. "You really surprised me yesterday," he said. Emily chuckled. "Surprised myself too. You were brave, kid. But next time, try not to pick fights with people who wear badges." "I didn't pick a fight," she replied softly. "I just stood up for someone who couldn't." Mr. Jenkins nodded slowly. "That's what makes it brave." The bell above the door rang, and the first customers of the day walked in. Life at the diner returned to its usual rhythm. Yet there was a strange energy in the air, like the calm before a storm. Later that afternoon, while Emily was serving lunch to a group of travelers, a local reporter walked in. He was carrying a small camera and a notepad. "Excuse me," he said politely. "Are you Emily?" She blinked, surprised. "Yes, that's me. How do you know my name?" He smiled. "Your story's all over social media. People are talking about you. The waitress who defended a biker against unfair treatment. Mind if I ask a few questions?" Emily's eyes widened. "Oh, I didn't know people were talking about that. I didn't mean to start anything. That's usually how good stories begin," the reporter said. "You did the right thing and people noticed." He took a few pictures, asked her what happened, and then left. Emily thought that was the end of it. She didn't realize that by evening her story would spread across biker forums, trucker channels, and even a few news pages. By sunset, hundreds of bikers from different cities had read about the young woman who stood up for one of their own. They didn't see her as a waitress. They saw her as a symbol of respect. Meanwhile, back at the diner, things were calm again. Emily poured coffee for an old man, refilled sugar jars, and joked with Mr. Jenkins. She had no idea that miles away, dozens of engines had already started to roar. The next day was brighter. The rain had stopped, and the road shimmered under the sun. Emily came to work early as usual. She tied her apron, checked the coffee machine, and turned on the open sign. Around mid-morning, she heard the distant sound of motorcycles. At first it was faint, like a faraway storm. Then it grew louder. The rumble rolled through the hills and across the parking lot. Cups on the shelves trembled. Mr. Jenkins looked up, worried. "What on earth is that?" Emily went to the window and froze. Down the road, she could see a long line of motorcycles, dozens, maybe hundreds, moving together like a wave of thunder. Their chrome shined in the sunlight, and their jackets carried the same red and white patch she had seen before. Hell's Angels. Her heart skipped. "Oh no," she whispered. "They're coming here." Within minutes, the parking lot filled with bikes. The engines went quiet one by one until there was only silence and the sight of over 100 bikers standing outside the diner. Mr. Jenkins whispered nervously, "Emily? What did you do?" She swallowed hard. "I think they're here because of what happened." The door opened. The same man she had defended, the quiet biker, stepped inside. His jacket was cleaner now, his expression calm but serious. "Morning, ma'am," he said. "Good morning," Emily replied softly. "Is everything all right?" He smiled slightly. "More than all right. We just came to say thank you." Emily blinked. "All of you?" He nodded. Word got around. "You showed respect when others didn't. That means something to us." Outside, the rest of the bikers stood quietly. No shouting, no noise, just quiet respect. Some nodded at her through the window. Emily didn't know what to say. Her eyes watered a little. "I didn't do anything big. I just told the truth." The biker smiled. "Sometimes the smallest truth takes the biggest courage." He looked around the diner. "Mind if we eat here today?" Emily glanced at Mr. Jenkins, who was speechless. "Of course," she said quickly. "You're all welcome." The next few hours were something no one in town had ever seen before. The diner filled with bikers, all polite and thankful. They ordered food, shared stories, and even helped clean tables. The parking lot looked like a sea of chrome and leather, but inside it was warm and full of laughter. For the first time, people saw another side of them, not wild, not dangerous, but loyal and kind. When the reporter came back later that day, he couldn't believe what he saw. He took photos, capturing Emily surrounded by the bikers, smiling shyly as they thanked her again and again. Before they left, the quiet biker handed her a small silver pin with wings on it. "For you," he said. "You earned this." Emily held it carefully. "Thank you. I'll treasure it." He nodded once. "You've got a lot of brothers now, Emily. If you ever need us, we'll ride." Then one by one the bikers started their engines again. The sound was deep and powerful, echoing through the hills like thunder. As they rode away, they raised their hands in salute. Emily watched them disappear into the horizon. Her heart felt full. She realized something that day. True strength doesn't always come from power or fear. Sometimes it comes from kindness and the courage to stand up for what's right. And that one brave stand had started something she'd never forget. By the next morning, the small diner was busier than usual. The smell of coffee mixed with the sound of people talking quietly. Emily wiped the counter with her usual smile, but deep down, she still couldn't believe what had happened the day before. The image of hundreds of bikers parked outside, all just to thank her, still played in her mind. It felt like a dream, a loud, thundering dream. "Emily!" Mr. Jenkins called from the kitchen. "You're on the front page of the local paper." "What?" she asked, rushing over. He held out the newspaper with a grin. On the front was a picture of her standing in the diner, surrounded by leather jackets and motorcycles. The headline read, "The Waitress Who Earned the Respect of Hell's Angels." Emily's mouth fell open. "Oh no," she said softly. "I didn't want attention." Mr. Jenkins chuckled. "Well, you got it now, kid. Look, people are already stopping by to meet you." He was right. The bell above the door didn't stop ringing. Travelers, bikers, and even families came in just to say hello. Some left big tips, others left thank you notes. One man in a business suit said, "The world needs more people like you." Another woman whispered, "My brother was a biker. Thank you for showing people they're not all bad." Emily smiled politely, but inside she felt shy. She hadn't done it for fame. She had just spoken from her heart. Later that afternoon, a small news van pulled into the parking lot. The local reporter, the same one from before, came in with a camera crew. "Emily, you've gone viral," he said with excitement. "Biker clubs from across the country are talking about you. You've become kind of a legend." Emily laughed nervously. "I'm no legend. I just served a man his coffee," he smiled. "That's what makes it special. You didn't do it for attention. You did it because it was right." The cameraman filmed a few shots of the diner. Emily stood behind the counter talking about kindness and respect. When the news segment aired that night, thousands more people saw it. Across towns and highways, the story spread like fire. On social media, people shared the video again and again. The comments were full of praise. "Faith in humanity restored. That girl has more Courage than most people I know. Respect to the waitress. True hero. Even bikers from other states began to post pictures of themselves, wearing their jackets with the caption, "For Emily." But not everyone was happy about the sudden fame. A few locals thought all the attention was too much. At a nearby coffee shop, a group of townsfolk whispered about her. "She's just lucky she didn't get hurt," one man said. Another replied, "Yeah, or maybe she just wanted the spotlight." Emily didn't know about those whispers, and even if she did, she wouldn't have cared. She hadn't done anything wrong. That evening, she sat outside the diner after closing. The air was cool and calm, and the road was quiet. She held the little silver pin the biker had given her. It had small wings on it, simple but beautiful. She turned it over in her hands, thinking about everything that had happened. "All this because I spoke up," she murmured. Mr. Jenkins came out with 2 cups of coffee and handed her one. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "Just thinking." "About what?" "About how fast things can change. Yesterday I was just a waitress. Now," she laughed softly. "Now people are calling me brave," Mr. Jenkins smiled. "That's because you are. You did what most folks wouldn't. You stood up for a stranger." Emily looked out at the dark road. "He wasn't a stranger anymore," she said quietly. "Not after that day." The next morning, a line of motorcycles appeared again, not hundreds this time, just a few. They parked outside the diner like before, but this time they weren't there to surprise her. They were there to help. One of them walked in holding a large envelope. "Morning, Miss Emily," he said kindly. "Our brothers from other towns wanted you to have this." She opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a letter, handwritten in neat words. "You reminded us that not everyone judges us by our jackets. You gave us respect when others turned away. This diner will always have our loyalty." And below the message were dozens of signatures, bikers from all over the country. Emily's eyes filled with tears. "This means so much," she whispered. The biker smiled. "We just wanted you to know that your kindness didn't go unnoticed. You've got family on every highway now." Over the next few weeks, business at the diner boomed. Truckers, travelers, and bikers from different places came to see the girl who stood up for a biker. Some took pictures with her. Others brought small gifts, patches, coins, keychains. Emily accepted them all with a humble smile. The diner, once quiet and almost forgotten, became a symbol of something special. A place where kindness had won over fear. Sometimes, when the day was quiet again, Emily would sit by the window with her coffee and think back to that rainy afternoon when it all began. It was strange how one small act, just a few, words spoken in courage could change everything. She didn't know what would come next. But she knew this. She would always stand up for what was right. And somewhere, out there on the open road, her biker friends were still riding, carrying her story with them. It had been a few peaceful weeks since the day the bikers first came. Life at Sonny's place slowly returned to normal. At least that's what Emily thought. The diner was busier now. Travelers stopped just to meet her, take a photo, or hear the story in her own words. Some brought flowers. Others brought their families. The small diner that once served only a few people now had a steady hum of laughter and warmth. Still, Emily stayed the same. She was kind, humble, and calm. She never saw herself as a hero, only a girl who did what felt right. One Friday afternoon, just as the sun began to sink behind the trees, Emily was cleaning tables when she heard the familiar sound again, a deep, distant rumble of engines. She froze. The last time she had heard that sound, hundreds of bikers had shown up at her diner. But this time the noise was softer, almost rhythmic, like a heartbeat coming closer. Mr. Jenkins poked his head out of the kitchen. "Don't tell me it's them again," he said, half joking. Emily laughed nervously. "Maybe it's just a few," she said. But as the sound grew louder, her eyes widened. Outside, through the large front window, she saw motorcycles rolling in. 1, 2, then 10, then 20. Within minutes, the parking lot was full again. But this time, they weren't just local riders. There were different patches, different colors, clubs from all over. Mr. Jenkins stepped beside her. "Well, I guess word travels fast." The door swung open, and the same biker she once defended walked in first. He smiled warmly. Behind him, more riders followed, filling the diner with leather jackets and friendly faces. Emily smiled, both nervous and happy. "You all came back?" The biker nodded. "Told you we would. But today's special." "Special?" she asked, curious. He stepped aside, and another man walked in, older, taller, with gray hair and kind eyes. He wasn't wearing a jacket, just a vest with a patch that said National President. The other bikers stood respectfully as he approached Emily. "Are you the young lady who stood up for one of our brothers?" he asked gently. Emily nodded. "I guess I am, sir." He smiled and extended his hand. "Name's Frank. I lead the Brotherhood. And we wanted to come here to thank you in person." Emily shook his hand, still surprised. "Oh, you didn't have to," he interrupted softly. "No, we did. Respect means everything to us. You showed it when others didn't. You didn't just help one man. You reminded everyone that kindness still exists." The entire diner went quiet. Even the customers who weren't part of the group listened closely. Then Frank continued. "We're not here to make noise or cause trouble. We're here to give something back." He turned and signaled one of the riders outside. Moments later, two bikers carried in a large wooden box. They placed it on a table in front of Emily. "What is this?" she asked. Frank smiled. "Open it." Emily lifted the lid. Inside was a custom-made leather jacket, hand-stitched with her name on the front, and a small angel wing symbol on the back. Across the bottom it read, "Honorary Sister." Her eyes widened in shock. I can't take this." Frank shook his head. "You already earned it. We just made it official." The diner erupted with cheers and clapping. Mr. Jenkins smiled proudly from behind the counter. Emily wiped her eyes. "Thank you," she said softly. "I don't know what to say." "Just keep being you," Frank said. "That's enough." They all ordered food, burgers, fries, coffee, pie. The diner was filled with laughter and warmth. Some of the bikers helped serve dishes. One even fixed a broken light in the corner. Outside, more riders parked their bikes neatly, taking turns coming in so the place didn't overflow. For hours, the little diner became the friendliest place on the highway. As the evening went on, more people stopped by. Curious travelers, reporters, even families who had seen the story online. The sound of engines mixed with the smell of grilled food and coffee. At one point, an elderly couple entered looking nervous. They sat near the door, unsure if they should stay. A biker with tattoos walked up to them and said, "Don't worry, folks. We don't bite." Then he laughed kindly and pulled out their chairs for them. Emily watched it all with amazement. These men, often judged by their looks, were now showing the world what respect and loyalty truly meant. When the night grew late, Frank stood up again. "Emily," he said, "before we go, we want to do one last thing." He turned to the crowd. "Brothers, you know what to do." One by one, every biker stood up, walked to Emily, and placed a small token on the counter. A coin, a pin, a patch, a bracelet, each one unique, representing their clubs and cities. "These," Frank said, "are symbols of our respect. Keep them close. Wherever you go, you'll have friends on every road." Tears filled Emily's eyes. "I don't deserve all this," she whispered. Frank smiled. "Yes, you do. You stood up when no one else would. That's rare. That's real strength." Before they left, they all gathered outside for a photo. The sight was incredible. Rows of motorcycles gleaming under the diner's neon lights. And in the middle stood Emily, wearing her new jacket, smiling brighter than ever. When the engine started again, the sound shook the night sky. The road glowed with red tail lights as they rode away, leaving the diner peaceful once more. Emily stood by the door long after they disappeared into the darkness. She touched the patch on her jacket and whispered, "Once strangers, now family." The next morning, the small town woke up to a sight no one would forget. The parking lot of Sonny's Place Diner was still shining with tire marks from the night before, where hundreds of bikers had gathered to show respect to a young woman who had stood up for what was right. For Emily, everything still felt like a dream. When she walked into the diner that morning, the smell of coffee, the hum of the fridge, and the quiet clinking of dishes all felt the same. But her heart knew everything had changed. The walls seemed to whisper stories now. Each chair and table held memories of laughter, gratitude, and unity. The jacket they had given her hung neatly on a hook by the door. She ran her fingers across the leather, tracing the words, "Honorary Sister." It still didn't feel real. Mr. Jenkins came out from the kitchen holding 2 mugs of steaming coffee. "Morning, kid," he said with a smile. "Still thinking about last night?" Emily smiled softly. "I don't think I'll ever forget it," he chuckled. "I've been cooking in this place for 20 years, and I've never seen anything like that. You managed to bring together people who everyone thought were dangerous. That's something special." She looked down at her cup. "I didn't mean to, I just couldn't stay quiet." "That's what makes you different," Mr. Jenkins said gently. "Most people wait for someone else to do the right thing. You just did it." Around noon, a few familiar faces returned. Some of the bikers who had been there last night came back for lunch. But this time they weren't alone. They had brought their families, wives, children, even grandparents. Emily's eyes widened as she saw the little ones running around the diner. "They brought their kids?" One biker laughed. "Yeah, we wanted them to meet the girl who reminded us what respect really means." The sight was heartwarming. Big, tough men with tattoos and leather jackets sitting beside small kids eating pancakes and milkshakes. The diner was full of laughter again. Emily noticed something. People from the town who had once been afraid of bikers were now walking in without hesitation. They waved, smiled, and even sat near them. Fear was gone, replaced by curiosity and kindness. One older lady who used to avoid the diner stepped up to Emily and said, "I saw it all on the news, dear. You taught us something important. We shouldn't judge people by how they look." Emily smiled. "Thank you, ma'am." "I just tried to be fair." The lady nodded. "Fairness is rare these days. You gave us a reminder." Later in the day, the man she had first offended, the quiet biker, came in again. He sat at the counter smiling. "Looks like you changed the whole town, Emily." She laughed softly. "I didn't change anyone. They just saw what I saw." He nodded. "Still, it takes someone brave to start it." He pulled something from his jacket and placed it on the counter, a small silver coin, old and worn, with wings engraved on one side. "We call it a token of honor," he explained. "It's not worth much in money, but it means everything in our group. We only give it to people who show real courage." Emily hesitated. "I can't take that," he smiled. "You already did the hard part. This is just a thank you." She accepted it carefully, holding it like it was made of gold. "I'll keep it safe," she promised. That evening, the diner was quiet again. The last customers had left, and the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. Emily and Mr. Jenkins sat by the window, watching the light fade. "Funny, isn't it?" Mr. Jenkins said. "A month ago, this place was just another stop on the highway. Now it's a place people come to remember kindness." Emily nodded. "It's strange how one small moment can grow into something so big." Mr. Jenkins looked at her. "You didn't just stand up for a man. You stood up for respect. That's a rare lesson these days." Emily smiled quietly. "Maybe respect is like coffee. You just have to serve it to everyone, no matter who walks in." They both laughed softly. The next morning, a letter arrived in the mail. It had no name on the envelope, just a red and white patch symbol in the corner. Emily opened it carefully. "Dear Emily, you reminded the world that kindness still has power. You stood up when others stayed silent, and that made all the difference. We've decided to make Sunny's Place an official stop on our route. Every year, our brothers and sisters will ride through your town to visit. Not because it's famous, but because it feels like home. The Brotherhood." Emily's eyes filled with tears as she read it. She held the letter close to her chest, smiling. When she hung the letter on the wall, right beside her leather jacket, she whispered to herself, "It wasn't about being brave. It was about being human." And that was the lesson everyone learned, from one girl, one act, and one quiet diner that became a symbol of respect. A year passed since that rainy afternoon when Emily stood up for a man everyone else was afraid of. The small roadside diner, Sunny's Place, had changed in ways no one could have imagined. Where there was once quiet and empty seats, now there was laughter, music, and a steady stream of travelers. Photos lined the walls, pictures of smiling bikers, truckers, families, and even police officers who now came in for coffee. And right above the counter, framed in glass, hung the letter from the Brotherhood and Emily's black leather jacket with the words, "Honorary Sister." People came from far and wide just to see the famous diner where kindness changed everything. But Emily still worked the same way she always had, serving food with a smile, remembering every regular's name, and treating strangers like friends. To her, fame didn't matter. What mattered were the people, the stories, and the simple moments of kindness that still happened every day. One sunny afternoon, Emily stood outside wiping the window when a car stopped nearby. A young boy got out with his mother. The boy pointed to the sign above the door. "Mom, is this the place from the news?" His mother smiled. "Yes, sweetie. This is the diner where that brave girl stood up for the biker." Emily overheard them and smiled warmly. "Come on in," she said. "We've got the best pie in the county." They sat near the window, and the boy kept looking around, his eyes wide. "Miss, were you really not scared that day?" he asked. Emily thought for a moment. "I was scared," she said honestly. "But sometimes being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It just means you choose to do the right thing anyway." The boy nodded thoughtfully, like he understood something important for the first time. Later that day, when the lunch rush ended, Emily walked outside to take a breath. The wind carried the faint sound of an engine, a familiar sound that made her heart smile. She looked down the highway and saw a single motorcycle approaching. It was the same man she had defended, wearing the same jacket, though now it looked more worn and faded. He parked his bike and walked up, smiling as always. "Still making the best coffee on this side of the state?" he said. Emily laughed. "Only because you bikers keep coming back for it." He sat at his usual table and she poured him a cup. "You been doing all right?" she asked. He nodded. "Better than all right. You wouldn't believe how far your story traveled. People talk about you in other states. Some clubs even started doing charity rides because of what you did." Emily blinked, surprised. "Because of me?" he smiled. "You showed everyone that respect goes both ways. That one act started a chain reaction." She sat down across from him, curious. "What do you mean?" He leaned back and said, "You made people remember that behind every patch, every badge, every uniform, there's just a person. Folks who never talked before started helping each other. Towns that once feared bikers now welcome them. You made that happen, Emily." Her eyes softened. "I didn't do all that," he smiled again. "You did enough to start it. That's how legacies work. They start small, but they don't end." As the sun began to set, other bikers started arriving. Some she recognized, others were new faces. Soon, the parking lot was full again. But this time, it wasn't about noise or attention. It was about family. They came bearing gifts, flowers, small pins, photos, and handwritten notes from riders across the country. One of them stood and raised a cup of coffee. "To Emily," he said proudly, "for reminding us that respect isn't given by fear. It's earned by kindness." Everyone echoed, "To Emily." She smiled shyly, blushing. "You don't have to thank me. You all changed too. We did this together." A cheer went up, and the diner glowed with warmth. The clinking of cups, the sound of laughter, and the smell of coffee filled the air again. Later that night, when everyone left and the lights were dimmed, Emily stood by the window looking at the stars. She thought about how it all began. A rainy day, a quiet diner. "A simple act of courage," she whispered softly to herself. "One small act can travel farther than we think." Mr. Jenkins walked out, turning off the last light. "You heading home, kid?" he asked. "In a minute," she said, still looking outside. He smiled knowingly. "They'll be back again next year." "You've started a tradition, you know." Emily nodded. "Good, maybe they'll bring more people. Maybe someone else will get inspired." "Maybe," Mr. Jenkins said. "But even if they don't, you already did something that'll last forever." She smiled at him. "What's that?" He replied, "You reminded people to be kind." Emily looked back out the window, the faint glow of the road lights reflecting in her eyes. "That's all I ever wanted," she whispered. The next morning, the world kept moving. Cars passed, the sun rose, and life went on. But somewhere on the open road, hundreds of riders carried her story in their hearts. And on every long ride, when the wind brushed their faces, they remembered the young girl from the diner who had stood up not just for one of them, but for what was right. Because sometimes, heroes don't wear badges or capes. Sometimes they wear aprons, pour coffee, and simply choose to be kind. That was Emily's legacy, and it was one the world would never forget.